Hey, today we'll be making an API in Google Sheets. So this is an API which you'll be able to ping through Python, and I'll also show you how to do that. So we're just going to make a simple database, which is a first, a last name, and a phone number, and also an email. We also have an ID. This ID is just a unique identifier for each of these items. So I guess we'll start with the code. So you want to go to extensions, app script. So now we want to make a function. You have to call it a specific name. So you have to call this function either doGet or doPost. Since we're going to do a GET request, we're going to call it doGet. Essentially, the difference is a GET request just gets the data, whilst if you do a POST request, you can also post data from the other end. And posting data just means sending data or uploading data. Anyway, so we're going to call the function doGet. And we just got this E here. That's just going to be what we input. In our case, we're going to try and input the ID, and we're going to get the first, last, phone, and email as the output. So we're just going to make a little variable called ID, and essentially we're going to write parameter.id. So this is a bit different than normal. The reason we do the dot parameter is because it returns it as a JSON. So you can imagine that our response our input response kind of needs to look like this. So we'll just say E, and then there's going to be like parameter, if I can spell. And then in that parameter field, there's going to be, say, IDs, and if you wanted to add other things, you could put other things. But this is essentially what it's going to look like, so that's why it's e.parameter.id. Anyway, so now we're going to access our spreadsheet, because we want to do some stuff with the spreadsheet. Let's get our active spreadsheet, and let's just get the sheet that we're working on now. Get sheet by name, and what did I call it? Names. Okay. So now we have our spreadsheet. So there's one more thing that I want to do, and these are just some more helping functions. I just want to get the last column. Sorry, for row, for length, I want to get the last row. And for width, I want to get the last column. And the main reason I want to do this is because I want to be knowing when this boundary ends and when this boundary ends, and you'll see why. Okay, so now let's get our IDs. So we're gonna get the range. We're essentially gonna get this range, so we know where all the IDs are. Because we're gonna loop through these IDs and try and find the ID which matches our ID parameter. Okay, so let's start at the very start, and then we're just gonna go our length, which we got from this value. Then let's get the values. Okay, now we have our IDs. We want to create some more fields. So data is going to be where we store our array, and our array is going to be either it's going to be one of these rows. And then we want to just make some more fields related to the actual data we're storing. So that's email and phone, and let's just make these blank for now. Okay. So now we're just going to make a quick for loop. Okay, so we're just going to loop through every single one of our IDs, and then if we get a match with this ID, then we're going to do something. So we're just going to do IDs I is equal to ID, then we do something. And I should just make clear that this ID value is going to be a string. So when the user inputs it via whatever method they use, a request or through their website, it's going to return a string because you cannot show an int online, or not easily anyway. So we're just going to make sure this is actually an int because obviously our current IDs fields are ints. So we're just going to pass it as an int. Okay, cool. So then we're going to get our data. So this will be get range. We want to skip the first row, so we're just going to do I plus 1, 2, 1. And we're skipping the first. Sorry, when I said first row, I meant first column because that's where the ID field is, and we're obviously not going to return the ID. Or we don't need to anyway, because the user's already input it. So then we just do get values. And to make sure that we get the values nicely, and we only get one lot of those values, I'm just going to get the very first set of values. So just put the 0. And then we can now split this up. So first, last, I can't remember which went first, phone, so phone will go now, and then we'll finish it off with email. Okay, so now we have our data, we now just need to return a value, so we're going to return. And so the main way to send data through an API request is through JSON, so that's what we're going to do. And there's two different ways you can send data. You can either send it as a HTML, or you can just send it as content. As text. We're just going to send it as text because we don't really care too much about the HTML. So we'll do content service dot create text output. Okay, so now we have our text output. Now we want to make it into a JSON string, so we'll go to Json Stringify, and let's make the data at least look a bit nice. So we'll make a field called data, and then we are going to make a field. We're going to make our fields within this data field. So we'll go first, last, and if you're not following, there'll be an example in a few secs anyway on how this data looks. Last, phone. If I can type. Struggling to type right now. And then our email, of course. Cool. Okay. So then what you want to do is actually press this deploy button up top, and you press new deployment. You can change these fields to suit how you like. I personally will have mine set to anyone, so then I can easily call it from my Python program. If you do have it set to one of these other commands, it means you will need to log in your Python program, and that is a lot more effort than what we're going to go into in this video. Maybe we'll go into it in another video. So we just press deploy. We get this URL, and you can just copy and paste it in. Okay, so we have a small error, so we're just going to fix it up. Line 13 for let I equals I. Okay, so that doesn't make sense. That needs to be 1, obviously. And all you need to do is, if you make a mistake, you just redeploy it. And we'll just get a new link. And let's try it again. It'll take a bit of time the first time. Okay, so we're returning something. We're not really returning anything useful right now, so what you want to do is recopy and paste that, I guess that URL, and then you want to do a question mark, which represents a query. So we're going to query if the ID is equal to 1. So you just type it in as easy as that, and then if you want to add another query, let's say for whatever reason you had another parameter, you'd go and then you could go maybe the name is Bo. We haven't added functionality for another query, so we're just going to stick to ID equaling 1. Okay, so here you go. We got our data, first, last, phone, and email. Obviously, if you want to do this, I suggest you add a few more. If it does fail to find the data, you add a few commands, or you add a null string, just to make it look nicer. Okay, so now that we're reading data online, we'll just try a new ID. So let's copy paste it again. We'll go ID equals 2 this time, and we should get the second user. Hopefully, yep, so there we go. James, Tame. Okay, so now what we want to do is build this in Python. So it's really simple. You just want to import the request library. And then, I'm not even joking when I say this, you can do this in 2 lines. So we're just going to make a response, sorry. And then we're going to use our request library. And this is a very standard library. We're just going to make a GET request. What you want to do is copy and paste that deployment link. I seem to have lost mine, so I'm just going to make a new one real quick. Copy and paste it into there. And then you can also do the ID equals 1. I think it looks a bit messy, so I'm just going to use a params, and then you go equals, and then you go IDs equals 1. It just makes it look a bit nicer and easier. So now if we run this, we might also want to do a print statement on this so we can actually see something. And let's just print it as JSON. You can also print it as text. There's a few different options. Okay, and there you go. We get our data. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.